The acrid stench of ionized air and burnt flesh hung heavy across the battlefield. Sergeant Marcus Weber moved methodically through the scorched landscape, his boots crunching over crystalline debris that had once been living structures. 3 hours since the last shots were fired, and still the ground radiated heat through his tactical soles. Sector 14 clear, he reported into his comm unit, receiving only static in response. Atmospheric interference from the battle, probably. He adjusted his respirator, the filters struggling against the particulate-laden air. Alliance command had been clear: sweep for survivors, eliminate any remaining Solarian forces, and gather intelligence. The aliens had hit the mining colony without warning, and humanity had responded with overwhelming force. Standard procedure. Clean. Efficient. Final. Marcus paused at a half-collapsed structure, something catching his eye in the rubble, a faint blue luminescence, pulsing weakly. His rifle came up instinctively as he approached, tactical light cutting through the haze. That's when he saw her. She was young, impossibly young to be in a war zone. Her iridescent skin, normally vibrant among her kind, was dulled with ash and blood. The characteristic ridge crest of the Solarians was partially shattered, leaking luminous fluid that pooled beneath her slender form. Her four-fingered hand clutched at a wound in her abdomen. She looked up at him with enormous, faceted eyes, violet irises contracted with fear. She knew what came next. They both did. Enemy combatant located, Marcus said automatically into his dead comm, his rifle trained on her chest. Protocol was clear. The alien girl made no move to fight or flee. Instead, she closed her eyes and tilted her head back, exposing her throat in what Marcus recognized as a surrender gesture. No, more than surrender, acceptance of execution. Shit, he muttered, lowering his weapon slightly. She couldn't be more than the equivalent of 16 Earth years. What was she doing here? The Solarians were known to use young adults in support roles, but this far forward in a battle zone? He knelt beside her, keeping enough distance to react if this was some trap. It wasn't. Her injuries were catastrophic, the kind battlefield medics marked with black tags. His scanner confirmed: massive internal bleeding, shattered exoskeletal supports, organ failure beginning. "You're dying," he said, knowing she couldn't understand his words but hoping his tone conveyed meaning. She opened her eyes again, a weak smile forming on her facial structure. She raised a trembling hand and pointed at his rifle, then back at herself. The message was clear. Make it quick. Something broke inside Marcus in that moment. He'd killed Solarians before, dozens in combat. But this wasn't combat. No, he said, slinging his rifle. Not today. The decision was made before his conscious mind could process the implications. Marcus activated his emergency medical kit, administering a universal coagulant that Alliance scientists had developed to work on most known sentient species. Her eyes widened in confusion as he worked, bioluminescent tears streaming down her face. "I'm Marcus," he said, pointing to himself as he dressed her worst wounds. "And I'm getting you out of here." He knew the consequences if caught: court-martial, imprisonment, possibly execution for treason during wartime. The war with the Solarians had obliterated any middle ground. You were either with humanity or against it. Yet looking at her, he couldn't see an enemy. Just a girl, abandoned by her retreating forces, left to die alone on a hostile world. She whispered something in her liquid language as he carefully lifted her broken body. The translator in his helmet attempted to process. Why? Because someone has to, he answered, knowing she wouldn't understand the words. As Marcus carried her away from the battlefield toward an abandoned outpost he'd spotted earlier, he felt her hand weakly grasp his armor. Not in resistance, but in wonder. "Vela," she whispered, touching her chest. "Vela," he repeated. "Hold on. Just hold on." Night was falling as Marcus disappeared with her into the shadows beyond the battle zone, leaving behind everything he knew, carrying a future neither of them could imagine. The abandoned outpost was barely more than a concrete shell with a partially intact roof, but it provided enough shelter from the caustic rain that had begun falling. Marcus laid Vela on his thermal blanket, careful not to disturb the temporary bandages he'd applied to her worst injuries. In the dim glow of his portable heater, her bioluminescent blood cast eerie blue patterns across the wall. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her breathing shallow and labored. Each time her eyes fluttered open, she seemed surprised to still be alive, even more surprised to see him still there. "You're not making this easy," Marcus muttered, injecting another dose of the universal coagulant into her system. The medical scanner showed her condition stabilizing, but barely. He'd stolen additional supplies from a forward medical cache, another crime to add to his growing list of offenses. On the third day, Vela's fever broke. Marcus had been dozing against the wall when a soft touch on his hand startled him awake. She was watching him, her violet eyes clear for the first time since he'd found her. "Water," he said, mimicking drinking. She understood, accepting the canteen with trembling hands. When she tried to sit up, Marcus gently restrained her. "Not yet. You're, whatever these are." He pointed to the partially regenerated ridge crest along her spine, "They're still healing." Vela studied him with undisguised curiosity. She spoke, a series of liquid consonants that his translator couldn't process without a larger sample size. Frustrated, she pointed to herself. "Vela." Then to him. "Marcus," he replied. She attempted his name, her vocal structure giving it a melodic quality, "Marcus." "Close enough," he smiled. Over the next week, a rudimentary form of communication developed between them. Vela would point to objects, and Marcus would supply the human word. She learned quickly, storing each new term with perfect recall. In turn, she taught him Solarian words, though his human vocal cords struggled with their complex harmonics. The language barrier wasn't their only challenge. Everything about human behavior seemed to confuse her. When Marcus changed her bandages, her bioluminescence would flare, a defensive reaction, he realized. When he ate in front of her, she would turn away, explaining through gestures that among her people, consuming sustenance was an intensely private act. "Enemy," she finally said one evening, using one of the human words she'd learned. She pointed to herself, then to him. "Why save enemy?" Marcus considered her question carefully. "Not enemy," he finally said, pointing to her. "Person." Her luminescence pulsed with emotion. "Solarian soldiers, leave me. Human soldier, save me." Her grammar was broken but understandable. "Not understand." "I don't understand either," Marcus admitted. "It just seemed wrong to leave you there." As Vela's strength returned, so did her curiosity. She examined his equipment, his rations, his weapons with methodical interest. When she found his holographic communicator, she recoiled, knowing it could summon other humans. "No call," Marcus assured her, showing her that it was disabled. "No one knows we're here." At night, the temperature would drop dangerously low. Without thinking, Marcus had wrapped his thermal blanket around both of them the first few nights when Vela was too weak to regulate her body temperature. Now that she was recovering, he kept his distance, sleeping across the room. On the 10th night, a particularly violent storm raged outside. Vela watched as Marcus shivered in his corner, stoically refusing to complain. After a long moment of internal debate, she carefully crossed the room and settled beside him, her naturally higher body temperature immediately warming the space between them. "Why?" Marcus asked, echoing her earlier question. Vela's facial ridges shifted in what he'd learned was her species' version of a smile. "Not enemy," she said. "Person." The storm raged on as they sat in comfortable silence, two beings from warring species finding unexpected sanctuary in each other's presence. Marcus knew their fragile peace couldn't last. Alliance patrols would eventually sweep this sector again, and his absence would be noted. But for now, in this forgotten outpost, something remarkable was happening. "Your people?" Vela asked hesitantly. "They kill you? For helping me?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. "Probably," he finally said. "But I don't regret it." Vela's luminescence dimmed with what he recognized as sadness. "I bring death to you." "No," Marcus said firmly. "I made my choice." He pointed outside to where the sounds of distant explosions occasionally punctuated the storm. "Out there, that's death. In here," he gestured to the space between them, "this is life." As Vela drifted to sleep, her head resting trustingly against his shoulder, Marcus wondered what would become of them when their sanctuary inevitably came to an end. Alliance forces controlled this quadrant, and Solarian territory was light years away. They were caught between two hostile forces, with nowhere truly safe to go. Yet looking at the sleeping alien beside him, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since before the war began: purpose. Whatever came next, he would find a way for both of them to survive. Morning light filtered through the cracks in the ceiling, casting prismatic patterns across the floor of their shelter. Marcus woke to find Vela already up, attempting to mimic the exercise routine she'd observed him performing daily. Her movements were still stiff, but vastly improved from the broken creature he'd carried from the battlefield 3 weeks ago. "Your form needs work," he said, demonstrating a proper push-up. Vela's facial ridges flattened in concentration as she copied him. "Build strength," she explained in her increasingly fluent, if still accented, English. "Heal faster." Marcus had scavenged supplies from abandoned structures nearby, finding clothing that could be modified to fit Vela's slender frame and different proportions. She wore a human jacket now, the sleeves cut to accommodate her longer arms, the collar removed to make space for her crest. "We need to talk about what happens next," Marcus said, unpacking their morning rations. "Alliance patrols will sweep this sector again soon." Vela's luminescence dimmed slightly, a sign of anxiety he'd learned to recognize. "You return to humans?" "No," he said firmly. "That's not an option anymore." He'd made his choice the moment he'd carried her from the battlefield. "But we can't stay here either." "Where then?" She touched the healing wounds along her side. "I slow you down." Marcus shook his head. "We go together or not at all." As they shared their meal, Vela had gradually grown comfortable eating in his presence, a significant cultural taboo overcome. Marcus unfolded a terrain map he'd compiled from memory and observation. "There's a trading outpost here," he pointed to a valley beyond the mountains. "Neutral territory, technically. Mixed species. We might find passage off-world." Vela studied the map intently. "Many days walking." "Many days," he agreed. "But staying means certain discovery." That afternoon, they practiced using the blaster Marcus had taken from a fallen soldier. Vela's species wasn't naturally aggressive, but her dexterity made her a quick study. When she hit the target dead center on her third try, her bioluminescence flared with pleasure. "Good shooting," Marcus complimented. "Had good teacher," she replied, her violet eyes meeting his with unmistakable warmth. That evening, as they packed their meager belongings for the journey ahead, Vela sat beside Marcus and tentatively touched his hand. Her skin was smoother than human skin, with a subtle texture like fine suede. "My people teach humans are monsters," she said carefully. "Violent. Without souls." Marcus gave a wry smile. "My people say the same about yours." "Both wrong," Vela said definitively. She hesitated, struggling with complex concepts in her limited vocabulary. "War makes simple stories. Enemy good, enemy bad. Truth is more complicated," Marcus supplied. Yes. Her facial structures shifted in what he now recognized as a smile. You, complicated. Their conversation was interrupted by a distant sound that made Marcus freeze, the distinctive hum of Alliance hover vehicles. He doused their light immediately, pressing a finger to his lips. The patrol passed within half a kilometer of their position, searchlights sweeping the broken landscape. Marcus and Vela remained motionless in the darkness, her natural bioluminescence dimmed to near invisibility through conscious control. When the patrol finally moved on, Marcus exhaled slowly. We leave at dawn. They traveled by night and rested during daylight hours, making slow but steady progress toward the mountains. Vela's strength improved daily, her alien physiology demonstrating remarkable regenerative capabilities now that the initial crisis had passed. During their daylight rest periods, they exchanged stories of their worlds. Marcus described Earth's oceans, forests, and cities to Vela, who listened with rapt attention. In turn, she told him of Solaran crystal forests and floating cities, her lyrical language adding beauty to already fantastic descriptions. Your world sounds beautiful, Marcus said after one such exchange. Was beautiful, Vela corrected, her luminescence dimming. Before war, many parts now. She made a gesture mimicking explosion. The war had devastated both their civilizations, though neither would admit it in official communications. Resources squandered, populations decimated, all over resource rights and territorial disputes that seemed increasingly meaningless the further Marcus got from military indoctrination. On their 7th night of travel, they crested a ridge and saw Alliance searchlights in the valley they'd planned to traverse. A forward operating base had been established directly in their path. We'll have to go around, Marcus said, studying their options. Adds 3 days, but... No choice, Vela finished for him, her hand finding his in the darkness. The gesture had become natural between them, a reassurance that transcended their biological differences. As they made camp in a protected ravine, Vela surprised Marcus by initiating a conversation about the future. If we reach trading post. Then what? Marcus had been avoiding this question. Find transport to a border world. Somewhere the war hasn't reached. Together? Her question hung in the air between them. If that's what you want, he replied carefully. Vela's luminescence pulsed briefly, revealing the intensity in her violet eyes. Is what I want. She moved closer to him, her head tilting in the way he'd come to recognize as indicating deep thought. You saved my life. Now my life, connected to yours. Vela, Marcus began, uncertain how to respond to the emotion in her voice. She silenced him by placing her slender fingers against his lips. Human words not enough, she said. Then, taking his hand, she placed it against the center of her chest, where her heart equivalent beat in a rhythm slightly faster than a human heart. With her other hand, she touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat. In my culture, she explained, this is recognition of bond. Marcus understood what she was offering, not just gratitude, but a connection that went beyond their circumstances. Somewhere in these weeks of survival, of teaching and learning, of danger and quiet moments, something profound had grown between them. I recognize our bond, he said solemnly. As they sat together under alien stars, their heartbeats gradually synchronized, two survivors finding in each other what their warring worlds had lost, the ability to see beyond difference to the person within. The trading outpost appeared first as a haze of lights in the valley below them. After 16 days of arduous travel through mountain passes and dense forests, the sight of civilization, however rough and frontier, was welcome. Harmony Point, Marcus said, consulting his outdated intelligence. Established before the war. No official allegiance. Vela's luminescence flickered nervously. Many species there? According to reports. Humans, Solarians, Thraxians. Anyone seeking to avoid official notice. He adjusted the hood that would partially conceal Vela's distinctive crest. "Remember, you don't speak unless necessary. Your accent would give you away immediately." She nodded, pulling the makeshift cloak tighter around her shoulders. Over their journey, her once broken body had healed remarkably, though faint scars still traced luminescent patterns across her skin. They approached the settlement cautiously. The outer perimeter lacked formal barriers, a promising sign that paranoia hadn't completely overtaken this place. Market stalls lined dirt streets, goods from a dozen worlds displayed openly. Trade, it seemed, remained stronger than prejudice, at least here. Marcus felt Vela tense beside him as they passed a group of humans. One glanced their way, but showed no particular interest in the hooded figure accompanying a battle-worn soldier. They continued toward a weathered building with a flickering sign, "Lodging." The proprietor was a heavy-set Thraxian female, her scaled skin showing age spots around her 3 eyes. She assessed them with practiced suspicion. "One room," Marcus said, sliding across their only valuable, a small piece of platinum salvaged from the battlefield. "3rd floor. Shared bath at end of hall," the Thraxian replied, pocketing the platinum without comment on its blood-stained edge. Their room was sparse but clean. Vela removed her hood with relief, her crest extending to its full height as she stretched. "We made it," she said, violet eyes bright with excitement. "First step," Marcus cautioned. "We still need transport off-world." They ventured out after nightfall when Vela's bioluminescence would be less noticeable. The central marketplace remained active, traders from countless worlds conducting business under perpetually glaring artificial lights. Vela froze suddenly, her hand tightening around Marcus's arm. "Solarians," she whispered. He followed her gaze to a group of her kind gathered near a food vendor. Unlike Vela, these were adults, warriors, judging by their fully developed crests and the distinctive scarring that marked veteran status. "They won't recognize you," Marcus assured her, though uncertainty crept into his voice. She shook her head. "Not fear recognition. Fear." She struggled for the word, transmission. Transmission? Emotional states. "My people share feelings when close." She took a step back. "They would sense my connection to human." Marcus understood the implication. Among her people, her bond with him would be immediately evident, a betrayal written in her very biology. They retreated to their room, plans for finding transport temporarily abandoned. As Marcus secured their door, Vela sat on the edge of the bed, her luminescence pulsing with distress. "Perhaps we separate," she suggested, not meeting his eyes. "You find human transport. I find Solarian way." The suggestion struck Marcus like a physical blow. "Is that what you want?" Her luminescence dimmed. "Want? No. But logic." He sat beside her, taking her hand. "We've come this far together." Morning brought new challenges. While gathering information in the market, Marcus overheard conversations about increased Alliance patrols in nearby sectors. The war was intensifying, pushing closer to this neutral haven. Meanwhile, Vela ventured cautiously toward the settlement's outskirts, where she'd noticed structures with distinctive Solarian architectural elements. She hoped to learn about any of her kind who might help them, or at least not immediately report them. What she discovered instead was a revelation. Behind the human-style buildings lay a hidden community, humans and Solarians living together. Families, even, mixed couples with hybrid children displaying characteristics of both species. She watched in amazement as a human man helped a Solarian woman tend a garden of crystalline plants. Nearby, children played, some with human features and faint luminescence, others with Solarian crests and human eyes. "Impossible," she whispered to herself. "Not impossible. Just forbidden," came a voice behind her. Vela turned to find an older Solarian male, his once vibrant crest now faded with age. He studied her with knowing eyes. You carry the same bond, he said in their native tongue. I sense it on you, connection to a human. Instead of condemnation, his tone held understanding. Vela's defenses crumbled, and she found herself following him to a modest dwelling where he introduced himself as Elder Nix. There are more of us than either government admits, Nix explained, serving her a traditional Solarian beverage. This settlement began as a trading post, but has become something more, a sanctuary. Hope blossomed within Vela. My companion and I seek passage off-world. Your companion, Nix repeated, his luminescence pulsing with subtle inquiry. The human soldier who saved you? Vela's own luminescence flared in surprise. How did you? Your emotional resonance tells a story, young one. His expression grew serious. Bring him here tonight. The settlement leader should meet you both. When Vela relayed this conversation to Marcus, his immediate reaction was suspicion. Could be a trap, he warned. Elder Nix could have reported me immediately, she countered. Instead, he showed me humans and Solarians living together. Families, Marcus. Like us, but... We're not a family, Vela, Marcus said gently. Her luminescence dimmed. No. But we are something without name. That evening, they made their way to the hidden community. The settlement leader, a human woman named Reyna, welcomed them with cautious hospitality. As they shared their story, Reyna and Nix exchanged meaningful glances. You're not the first to seek sanctuary, Reyna said. The settlement survives through strict neutrality and secrecy. Marcus sensed something withheld in her words. What aren't you telling us? Reyna's expression hardened slightly. The Alliance knows we exist. We pay for their oversight. Intelligence, primarily. You spy for them, Marcus translated. We survive, Reyna corrected. The Alliance commander for this sector arrives tomorrow. He'll want to speak with you. Later, alone in their room, Vela paced anxiously. I don't trust her, she admitted. Nor do I. Marcus checked his blaster. We should leave tonight. Their preparations were interrupted by a soft knock. When Marcus cautiously opened the door, a young hybrid child stood there, luminescence flickering nervously. My father says you're in danger, the boy whispered. Reyna contacted Alliance already. They're offering bounty for deserters. Marcus's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Thank you, he told the boy, slipping him a ration bar in gratitude. As the child disappeared down the hallway, Vela's expression reflected both betrayal and resignation. Even here, the war finds us. We leave now, Marcus said, gathering their few possessions. Back route, through the market. They had nearly reached the settlement's edge when shouts erupted behind them. Alliance soldiers poured from side streets, weapons drawn. There. A voice called out. The deserter. Vela reacted instantly, pushing Marcus toward cover as blaster fire erupted around them. They returned fire, creating enough chaos to slip down an alleyway. They want you, not me, Vela realized as they ran. I can distract them. Not happening, Marcus cut her off, pulling her alongside him. They emerged near the spaceport, alarms now blaring throughout the settlement. Their options dwindled with each passing second. Vela spotted Elder Nix waving urgently from a small cargo vessel. There. As they sprinted toward the ship, a blaster bolt struck the ground at Marcus's feet. He turned to see Reyna herself, weapon raised. The Alliance wants its deserter, she called out. Give yourself up, soldier, and the alien goes free. Marcus knew it was a lie. Alliance protocol was clear regarding contaminated civilians who had extended contact with enemy species. Run to the ship, he told Vela quietly. I'll be right behind you. Before she could protest, Marcus turned and fired, not at Reyna but at the power coupling above her head. The resulting explosion provided the distraction they needed, but as Vela reached the ship's ramp, she turned to see Marcus fall, struck by blaster fire from another direction. In that moment, the choice Vela had feared crystallized before her, her freedom, or the life of the man who had saved her. Time seemed to slow as Vela watched Marcus fall. Without hesitation, she abandoned the safety of the ship's ramp and raced back toward him, her bioluminescence flaring with desperate intensity. Blaster fire scorched the ground around her, but she moved with newfound speed and purpose. Go! Marcus gasped as she reached him, blood seeping from a wound in his side. Save yourself. Vela's violet eyes flashed with determination. Together or not at all, she echoed his words from weeks ago, slinging his arm over her shoulders. Elder Nyx appeared beside them, his aged frame belying surprising strength as he helped support Marcus. Together they half-dragged, half-carried him toward the waiting ship, Nyx using his own body as a shield. My debt to balance the scales, the elder said cryptically when Vela tried to protest his sacrifice. They barely made it up the ramp before the ship's engines roared to life. The hybrid child who had warned them earlier was at the controls, his small hands moving with practiced efficiency across the launch sequence. My father said to take you to the Verge colonies, the boy explained as they cleared the settlement's airspace. He'll find another way out. Vela laid Marcus on the cargo bay floor, frantically assessing his wound. The blaster had caught him just below the ribs, cauterizing as it tore through flesh. Serious, but survivable, if infection didn't set in. Look at us now, Marcus said weakly, attempting a smile. Roles reversed. Be quiet, Vela instructed, applying pressure to the wound. Save strength. As the ship broke atmosphere, alarms blared. The boy's voice came through the internal comm, Alliance interceptors launching. Hold tight. The small cargo vessel shuddered as it executed evasive maneuvers. Vela braced herself over Marcus, protecting him from being thrown across the bay as the ship lurched violently. Need to reach jump point, the boy called out. 1 minute. Marcus's breathing grew labored, his skin alarmingly pale. Vela felt a surge of fear unlike anything she'd experienced during the war or their escape. This human, her human, could not die. Not after everything. Stay with me, she pleaded, her luminescence pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, trying to stabilize him through the bioelectric field her species could generate. Please, Marcus. The ship gave a final violent shudder, and then stars streaked into lines outside the viewport as they entered hyperspace. The immediate danger had passed. The journey to the Verge colonies took 3 days. Vela never left Marcus's side, using what limited medical knowledge she had to keep infection at bay. By the time they arrived, his condition had stabilized, though he remained weak. The Verge stood at the very edge of mapped space, beyond both Alliance and Solarian territory, a collection of habitable worlds populated by refugees, explorers, and those seeking to escape the long reach of the war. Their young pilot guided them to a small settlement on a forested moon. New Harmony, he called it. Real one, not like back there. The settlement lived up to its name. As they disembarked, Vela saw humans, Solarians, and at least 3 other species moving freely among buildings that blended architectural styles from across the galaxy. No one gave her uncovered crest or Marcus's Alliance-issue pants a second glance. A community healer, a Thraxian with surprisingly gentle hands, treated Marcus's wound properly. He'll recover, she assured Vela. Humans are remarkably resilient creatures. Tell me about it, Vela responded with a tired smile. They were given a small dwelling on the settlement's outskirts, a single room with a shared living space, crude but comfortable. As weeks passed and Marcus regained his strength, they gradually integrated into the community. Vela's knowledge of crystalline agriculture from her homeworld proved valuable, while Marcus's military engineering training helped improve the settlement's power systems. One evening, as they sat on the step of their dwelling watching twin moons rise, Marcus broached the subject they'd both been avoiding. "You saved my life," he said, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. "Balance," Vela replied simply. "You saved mine first." Marcus shook his head. "It's more than that now. Isn't it?" Her luminescence pulsed with emotion she no longer tried to hide. Among the mixed community of New Harmony, there was no need to conceal her connection to this human man. "Yes," she admitted. "Much more." Their relationship had evolved beyond rescuer and rescued, beyond fugitives bound by circumstance. Out here, away from the war and its rigid definitions of enemy and ally, they had discovered something neither of their cultures had prepared them for. "On my world," Marcus said carefully, "when two people feel as we do, they sometimes choose to build a life together." Vela's facial ridges shifted in her version of a smile. "On my world also. Though never with humans before." "Would be complicated," Marcus acknowledged. "Already complicated," she countered, her luminescence brightening with amusement. "But good complicated." 6 months later, under the light of those same twin moons, they formalized their bond in a ceremony that blended both their traditions. Elder Nyx had eventually made his way to the colony and presided over the rite, binding their hands with a cord woven from earth silk and Solarian crystal thread. "What you begin here," the elder told the gathered community, "is more than a union of two beings. It is a testament to what might be possible, if we choose to see beyond our differences." As the years passed, their small dwelling expanded to accommodate their growing role in the community. Marcus became a leader in the settlement's defense council, working to keep New Harmony hidden from both Alliance and Solarian intelligence. Vela established gardens of hybrid plants, combining species from both their worlds into new, hardier varieties. They never had biological children, their physiologies were too different, but they became surrogate parents to many of the settlement's orphans, particularly those of mixed heritage who struggled to find their place. News of the war reached them occasionally through new refugees. The conflict continued, grinding both civilizations down in a war of attrition neither could truly win. Sometimes Marcus would grow quiet after such reports, his thoughts turning to comrades left behind. Vela would find him then, her luminescence offering comfort in the darkness. 10 years after their arrival, a battered Alliance scout ship landed at New Harmony. Marcus and Vela were among those who cautiously greeted it, weapons ready. The ship's hatch opened to reveal not soldiers, but civilian refugees, and among them, a face Marcus recognized, Lieutenant Talia Reyes, once his commanding officer, now gray-haired and exhausted. "Weber," she said in disbelief, staring at Marcus. "You're alive?" "Different name now," he corrected her gently. "Different life." Talia's gaze shifted to Vela, noting their matching bond bracelets and the easy familiarity between them. Understanding dawned in her eyes. "The war is faltering," she told them as they shared a meal that evening. "Resources depleted on both sides. Some are beginning to question everything." "And you?" Vela asked directly. Talia considered the question carefully. "I've seen enough death. When rumors reached us of places like this." She gestured around at the mixed community. "I had to see if it was true." Marcus and Vela exchanged a glance, a lifetime of understanding passing between them. "It's true," Vela confirmed. "Difficult, sometimes. But true." As the twin moons rose once again over New Harmony, Marcus stood with Vela at the edge of their garden, watching the settlement lights below. Somewhere in the distance, children laughed, human and Solarian voices blending in perfect harmony. "When I found you on that battlefield," Marcus said softly, "I never imagined this." Vela's luminescence pulsed with contentment as she leaned against him. "Sometimes the things we cannot imagine are exactly what we need." Around them, hybrid flowers blossomed in the moonlight, plants that should never have existed, thriving in soil far from their ancestral worlds. Like the two of them, these new creations had found a way not just to survive, but to flourish in unexpected circumstances. Together, Marcus whispered, the word that had become their private benediction. Or not at all, Vela completed, her luminescence merging with the starlight above. In a galaxy still torn by conflict, their small dwelling stood as quiet testament to an alternative, proof that even in the darkest times, compassion could create something new and beautiful from the ashes of war.